Hey everyone, I thought it might be fun to do a video on my top 5 favorite personal motorcycles that I've owned myself. I've been riding motorcycles almost 50 years. It's like, how is that even possible? Where does the time go? My parents bought me my first motorcycle when I was about 10 years old, and I've been riding ever since. Of course, I started out like with a lot of people my age on dirt bikes. I've had several dirt bikes. Went from that to naked street bikes, V-twin cruisers. I've owned several big heavy touring bikes. And matter of fact, I've owned 18 motorcycles since I was 10 years old. I've owned 6 Harley Davidsons, 6 Hondas, 3 Yamahas, 2 Indians, and a Kawasaki. So I've owned both American brands. Of the 4 major Japanese brands, I've owned 3. The only thing I've never owned is a Suzuki. And so again, I just thought it might be fun to think about what was my most favorite, and then what would come in, you know, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And I'd like to know what your favorite motorcycle is of all the bikes you've owned, and you can comment below. Choosing places 4 and 5, very difficult. They could have both tied for 4th place easy. Matter of fact, I thought I may just have to flip a coin. Of course, they were very similar motorcycles, same brand, same year model. The only real difference, everything but the fairing, that was the only real difference. So here we go. Number 5. Here, I'm still having a hard time deciding which one to pick. I'm gonna say number 5 was my 2005 Harley Road Glide. I owned that motorcycle longer than any motorcycle I've ever owned. Of course, I was blessed to have the opportunity to pay cash for it. I bought it used, paid cash for it, and you know what they say, there's nothing better than a motorcycle that's paid for. So number 5 would be my Harley Road Glide, and before I bought it, somebody put the hammock seat on it. They put the trunk, the tour pack on it, so they really had it set up nice before I ever bought it. Coming in at number 4 was a 2005 Harley Electra Glide Ultra Classic. I bought it brand new, my first Harley touring bike. I really liked that motorcycle at that time. In 2005, that was the top of the line, unless they made a CVO. I don't know if they made a CVO in the Electra Glide that year or not. I probably should go back and look and see. I don't recall a CVO. Of course, I really never even look at the CVOs because of the price. But so that was number 4, my 05 Harley Electra Glide, and again, it was extremely similar to the Road Glide with the exception of the fairing. One reason I picked it over the Road Glide is when it comes to function over fashion, I like the Batwing fairing better. I think it provides better wind protection. Of course, that may all be psychological, but I think it's because the fairing is much closer to you than the Road Glide fairing. Of course, I have the 05 model. The new Road Glide fairings have extra vents and had been reshaped, but I really like the wind protection on the Batwing fairing. I'm tall, and I felt like that wind was coming over the Road Glide fairing and hitting me about eye level, even with the tall windshield. So I think that's the reason I would put my Electra Glide just over the Road Glide. So coming in at number 3, back in 19, I bought a Harley Street Glide. I bought it brand new. And I liked everything about it except for one thing. I despised that rear suspension. You know, that 05 Road Glide and Electra Glide, they had, in my opinion, a way better suspension than that 19 Street Glide. They did away with the air shocks. They went to a system where you have a knob on one side, I think it was the left side, and you dial it and it would adjust the rear end. And I could not find the sweet spot. I don't care where I set it, and I'd look at the chart, figure in the weight, it was still miserable. if I had have kept that bike, I kept thinking I'm gonna have to spend at least $1,000 to get some decent rear shocks. Now, I will say the shocks are much better on the Harley Limited, even though it's the same chassis. It's the Street Glide, Road Glide. They put those short shocks on it to give it that slam look. But with very little travel, it was rough, in my opinion. I did not like the suspension. So that was number 3, my Street Glide. Coming in at number 2, actually number 2 I traded for number 3. And you talk about buyer's remorse. I really didn't have any buyer's remorse for buying the Street Glide. It was a great bike other than the suspension. But I had seller's remorse for getting rid of number 2. I traded number 2 in on number 3, and I thought, what in the world have I done? Number 2 was an Indian Chief Vintage. It was Indian red, ivory cream, two-tone, the tan leather with all the fringe. Absolutely gorgeous motorcycle. By far the best looking motorcycle I've ever owned. I can't tell you how many times people came up to me and asked if they could take a picture of my motorcycle. And a lot of times it was ladies. Some of them, their story was their boyfriend or their husband was in the market for a motorcycle, and it's like, can I take a picture of yours? I'm going to go home and tell my significant other this is what they need to buy. Or I remember one lady told me, she said, I don't know anything about motorcycles, but if I was going to buy one, that's what I would want. And of course a lot of men came up and complimented it and took pictures of it as well, but it really was by far the best looking motorcycle that I've ever had. But it just had the windshield, and I like a full touring bike with the fairing, especially in this modern age where you can get navigation and tons of other features. So I traded the Vintage in on the Street Glide. Unhappy with the Street Glide suspension anyway. So, and if I kept the Street Glide, I thought, well, I'd want to put a tour pack on it. I'd want to put lowers on it, a better suspension. Now I got to think, if I'm going to do all that to it, maybe I just want to go ahead and trade my Street Glide and go back to a full touring bike, because that's really my preferred style of motorcycle, is the full touring bike. I traded that Street Glide in on a 2018 Indian Roadmaster. I bought it in 19. It was a leftover from the year before, and so my 2018 Indian Roadmaster is my number 1 pick. It is extremely comfortable, fantastic suspension, lots of power. Of course, the Harley 107 is an extremely solid motor too. It's very comparable to this 111. But this Indian, I like the style, the features, the performance, the comfort, and it is my favorite motorcycle of all 18 motorcycles I have ever owned. Now, I guess I could do a couple of honorable mentions. My very first motorcycle was a little Yamaha 60 Enduro. I rode that thing and rode that. I don't even remember how many miles I had on it. I rode it and rode it and rode it. It was a great little bike, perfect little bike for a 10-year-old to learn on. I rode it and rode it and rode it, and eventually my parents bought me a larger motorcycle, and we sold that one to my friends next door, and they rode that little bike. And really, any of the Hondas I've owned would be worthy of honorable mention. I've owned 6 Hondas. Not a single one ever went into the shop for repair. I can't say that about my Harleys. About half of the Harleys I've owned have been in the shop for repairs, but none of the Hondas ever did. But if you love Harleys, buy Harleys. If you're willing to consider other brands, right now I really prefer the Indian brand overall. Now, it's not a perfect motorcycle, but I prefer it slightly over the Harley Davidson, and certainly the Hondas would come in very close because of their dependability and comfort as well. So that's my favorite. Is my Indian, at least at this point. I'd like to know what your favorite is and some of the motorcycles you've owned. So be sure and comment and subscribe. Click like, click the little bell icon, and you'll be notified when I post other videos. Of course, the vast majority of my videos are motorcycle related. I do also some little short, usually about a 1 or 2 minute devotionals, and of course I have some family videos on there where we're traveling and doing vacations, that kind of stuff. So again, I hope you enjoyed my thoughts. I'm certainly not a moto journalist. I'm just a guy that loves motorcycles and loves to ride. I love to watch other people's YouTube videos. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Thank you for watching.